Very pleased to welcome Molly Zuckerman-Hartung, who has come all the way from Chicago to be with us tonight. Three of Molly's works are in the exhibit upstairs, and I know we'll be talking about them later, so I'm not going to describe them for you now. I remember when Eric introduced me to Molly's work, we were looking at her website and came across a list that she had devised together with the artist Dana DiGiulio, titled Painters You Should Know. It listed about 150 painters from throughout history in 4 evenly spaced text columns. The names were alphabetized. There was no hierarchy of attention other than that. It featured figures such as Hieronymus Bosch, Raphael, Elizabeth Murray, John Curran, John McNeill Whistler, Michelle Grabner, Tom Wesselman, Howardina Pindell, Karen Klibnik, Ad Reinhardt, and a broad and Catholic assembly of luminaries. You could say that the matter-of-fact understated list relativized the canon of painting's history, equalizing the positions, strategies, personalities, historical, political, social context of the artists. Or you could propose it as an invitation to engage with those very factors. After all, these are painters you should know. And that knowing implies an engagement with who they were, what they made, why they made, or some complex composite of these kinds of questions. This list became an early key to our thinking around this exhibition. It represented, to an extent, the horizontality and accessibility of information today, but also outlined a deeply subjective canon shaped by the artists, an acknowledgement of history where one could and should certainly take sides, but also one that is contextual, relational, and complex, less about establishing either or categories, more about engaging with both and. It also struck us as an invitation to a conversation. It was something of an offering. It said, here's our list, what's yours? One of the pleasures of being a curator, or I guess anything for that matter, is that you get to meet extraordinary people. In the process of putting together Painter, Eric and I met with many artists and had numerous studio visits, long conversations with people who taught us a lot and were generous in doing so. I'm a furious note-taker, but somehow I don't have notes of our first studio visit with Molly. I don't know if I had a pad, but whatever happened, I put it aside. I think it felt better to talk and to engage with the multiple objects in that space that in a way seemed inseparable from each other, materialistic explorations that were also thoughts, marginalia, footnotes, erotica, art historical put-downs or embraces, diaristic détournements. I can't say that word, détournement. I think it lasted about 4 hours, and when it was over, I knew that something had happened, but I'm still not quite sure what. Anyway, this is my slightly sentimental way of saying that I'm excited that Molly is here tonight, and I know Eric and Ashley share that excitement, and looking forward to her lecture, which I think is called Not Late But Early, but maybe it's just called Lecture Balls. Anyway, Molly Zuckerman-Hartung is a painter living in Chicago, where she is represented by Corbett versus Dempsey Gallery. She has shown her work in solo shows at Acoustic Neuroma Gallery, New York, Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago, Rowley Knerk Gallery, Chicago, and Gallery Kedel Wilborn in Karlsruhe, Germany, as well as group shows at Derek Eller, Harris Lieberman, and Lisa Cooley galleries in New York. And Golden and Tony White galleries in Chicago. In 2011, she was featured in a 2-person show called Hysterical Sublime with artist David Keating at Spazio Cabinet in Milan. Molly teaches painting and drawing at the School of the Art Institute and Northwestern University and is co-founder of Julius Caesar Gallery, an artist-run exhibition space in Chicago. So without further ado, everyone, here's Molly Zuckerman-Hartung.
Thanks. That was, oh no, now I'm mic'd. My voice is strange to me. That was a really nice introduction, Bart. You hit a lot of things on the head, so I hope that you sort of keep his words ringing in your ears as I begin to try to organize my thoughts for you. And will that happen? And before I start that, I would just like to say thank you to Eric and Bart, and huge thank you. I can't even Yeah, I should probably go on a second, actually, about the thank you. You've given me a lot, amazing studio visits to begin with, and then ongoing conversation, support beyond what I could possibly ask for, or certainly expect. I'm sort of newly understanding myself to be an artist that has opportunities like this. It's really new, and it's happened really fast, and Eric and Bart have been a huge part of that, and allowing me to understand myself as somebody who might have something to offer other people. And I'm still sort of in that transitional period of trying to figure out what it is that I have to offer. I know that I'm a teacher with something to offer, but as an artist, I'm not, I'm still debating with myself. And you guys have been really gorgeous in sort of just supporting that all along the way. And also Ashley and Pamela and Laurel have all communicated with me so warmly, so generously, so constantly throughout this whole process in a way that's awesome. And also Doug and Andy very recently with the tech stuff. And then Brooke Canther has come with me and has been sort of assisting me on this trip, came and helped crit a class today at MCTC, which was great. And so those are some thank yous, and there's some more sort of dedications later, mid-talk. But yeah, it always sort of, I can either say too much or too little, and once I start letting myself run at the mouth, it goes on, as that I think has already been sort of made clear. But I'm going to try to frame things, and then hopefully the images can begin to speak for themselves. Of course, they might speak for themselves anyway, but I don't want to let them yet. You were sort of already, Bart, helping frame this problem with hierarchies, and I want that to really sort of hang in the air. And as well, the moment in the opening day talk with Michelle Grabner and Bruce Hanley and Jan Vervoort, I spoke from the audience and encouraged them to Michelle Grabner had instigated the idea that there should be some judgment, or what kind of judgments do you guys have to make about this show? And then they sort of demurred and didn't. They were reticent, and I spoke up from the audience, sort of in a heated emotional state, and said, come on, like give us a judgment. We want to know. And was it Jan? I think it was Jan who shot back at me. What do you want, a father figure? Put your tiny hand in mine. So as you came in, I was playing George Michael's, that was the reference. And I thought it was amusing, and I did actually yell back, yeah, painting is dad. But I just wanted to sort of keep that present in the room, because I'm sort of coming to a complicated understanding of myself, which is a sort of lifelong understanding of myself as a feminist, and also somebody who's interested in engaging with dad, i.e., structures, hierarchies, institutions, paternity. I had to write an artist statement for a job that I'm applying for, a full-time job at the Art Institute. And I started off by saying I am a bastard painter. And that is both a sort of like an intimate detail about myself. I was born out of wedlock. My mother was not married. And so my paternity is known but complicated, which I think is true for many of us. But also as a painter, I feel my relationship to the hierarchies of painting is complex. And so I'll try to go into that in different ways. It's not as easy as they're all the same, because they're definitely not all the same. But it's when you don't have a father that you are sure about, all fathers become sort of interesting potentials. And so then it's about what's your relationship to the father. And so I'm really interested in painting as a hierarchy, as this historical weight, but we'll get into that in a moment. So to start with lecture balls, I'm just going to start with the, you've all been reading this, but it's an uncomfortable sticking together of the genitals usually caused by being forced to remain in an uncomfortable cramped chair in a lecture hall. So I'm addressing your position. And this is the painting that I call lecture balls. And I'm thinking about it in a couple of ways. I'm interested in male genitalia anyway, I guess, as a thing, as a structure. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But also the other way I'm thinking about this painting is I have a sort of an image of Matisse painting the piano lesson tucked behind that, that sack. And the painting is actually burlap. And so it's a really sort of friction-full surface with another friction-producing weight hanging in front of it, which produces the ability to hold. So there's a grasping or a holding that this painting can do of an image. And I'm thinking about all the time about how things connect to other things, how to stick things to other things. So collage in its sort of fullest sense, how things get stuck together. And I think about that in terms of relationships. Just anything I say, just imagine that it's always a metaphor for everything else, because that's how I think. So, but I think also thinking in terms of content templates on the internet, right? That you know, whether it's websites or social networking sites or all kinds of sites now are templates for content, but the content can be slipped in and out. And how does that? How do we think about content or images when they are replaceable? In fact, always being replaced and sort of moving through. Yeah, and this lecture, like almost everything I do, is under the sign of Judith Butler and this relationship to the other that I have in that quote there. So hopefully you've had a chance to read it. And so I was just sort of, yeah, I can say too much. This is going to be a talk in which I say too much. I gave a talk at the MCA earlier this year where I showed almost all black paintings, which I've made a lot of, and that would be my attempt to not say very much. So we're in a different place in the process. And I thought, both because I'm just in this place in my process where I'm sort of generating a lot of ideas and things are coming together, but I don't quite know where I want them to go yet or what I want to do with them. But also because you called this a studio talk. It says studio talk. So I'm just sort of letting you into process. You can pull things together and make some meaning out of them. But this would be another example. This is a painting that is maybe from 2009. And it hung in the gallery on the left, the way that you see it, with that denim flap in front of it. So these different, I'm always sort of thinking about when I would like to reveal and when I would not. And when I made this painting, I was thinking a lot about Courbet's L'Origine du Monde and other paintings of the 19th century, erotic paintings, and the curtain in front of the painting, and erotic drawings. And so they would be looked at only at certain times, that they were not looked at all the time, not always readily available to the gaze. Okay, so this is a photograph that Bart took of me, kind of clowning, I suppose, as we were installing the show. Yeah, I'm not going to talk this much about every image, but I'm just trying to start us off. So we picked a few paintings from the studio, had a lot of conversations about what was going to come to the show, and then I got an email from Eric and Bart suggesting that this pink painting go in the show, and I was like, great, awesome, that's a great idea. And then I was rereading this Benjamin Buchloh article and just thinking about what is it to be in a museum, and I thought, I don't want that weird, blushing, joyful, sexy painting. It's too personal. I don't want it in a museum. I don't know if I want to give that away. I don't know if I want to show that. So I put this weird black veil thing on it. I guess I tried to make it more SM or something. And then when we were in the museum and hanging the painting, I just thought, this was ridiculous. Like I'm doing this weird thing again, this push-pull. And so yeah. So I took it off. I cut it off, and so that had to be the sort of theatrical event. And I don't know how I felt about that. But the painting is called The Impossible, Blushing for Now. And the other thing I was sort of started thinking about, Bart asked, he said, you have to put that in your talk. And I said, well, of course I'm going to tell them that you told me I had to put it in the talk. But then I actually put it in the talk and started thinking about it in relation to, and you can't read the names on it, but this diagram and this text. And this is these are the didactics outside the Inventing Abstraction show at the MoMA in New York right now. And I was just in New York and I saw the show, and it made me irate. So it's you can read, abstraction was not the inspiration of a solitary genius, but the product of network thinking, of ideas moving through a nexus of artists and intellectuals working in different media and in far-flung places. And then they even have the key. So the names in red are the artists who have over 24 connections within the network. And the other ones are artists who have less than 24 connections. So who's the most popular? It's a popularity contest between people like Kandinsky and Mondrian and ARP, right? And so both the very idea that these people were networking, that's how these relationships, Malevich, right, and that's how these relationships were structured. It's really unsettling to me. It's the application of contemporary language to relationships that took place in a different time, and they were different subjectivities. And it's those subjectivities that, as a painter, I am trying to inhabit. It's really, I think it's really possible if you follow very closely in somebody's footsteps, in their imprint, in the way that they've touched the surface, in the way that they've made things. If you try to follow it closely, you can begin to understand how they think, because we make our brains as we make things. We're being made while we're making something. And if I make something in the same way that Mondrian made something, I know something about how Mondrian thought. And there's no other way to get into people's heads in the past. We have history, we have all these different sort of methodologies for getting at the past, but it's very remote. And it has nothing to do with networking. I would say these people were fucking, they were loving each other, they were hating each other, they were fighting, they would blackball each other, they would write manifestos together, they were political, highly political people. Almost everybody who invented abstraction were engaged on a radical level. Either that or they were highly, highly hermetic and pulling themselves away from the world in sort of extreme anti-society positions, but they were not networkers. And so I'm just interested in setting the message straight, setting the story straight, or at least starting an argument if somebody wants to disagree with me. And so I guess I was thinking about myself being caught in some kind of a net. If it's a network, then it's a tangled network, then it's a messy network, then it's a dangerous network. So this is the painting, The Impossible. There it is without its veil. On the right is a painting that I made called Going into Space. Sorry about my weird sound flips. It's called Going into Space, and it's kind of a joke to myself about space in a painting and depth in a painting. And on the top, obviously, is Matisse's Woman Before an Aquarium or Goldfish Bowl, which is one of the sort of major guiding lights of my relationship to painting. It's in the Art Institute's collection. I look at it all the time. I think about it in different ways, simply in terms of reverie or daydream. It looks increasingly to me like catatonic instead of daydream, a little less romantic. I always think, there's things, right, that those stripes, those little bits of stripes on the bottom edge of the table are so great. His use of color, it's so kind of dark, somber, but also really vivid. I was just thinking yesterday about how I love the pink in her arm being the same as the pink of the table. And I always think, too, in terms of what we get. So if you have Caspar David Friedrich's Sublime was, the ocean or glaciers or these huge spaces, and maybe we just get a goldfish bowl now. Where do we get our Sublime? This is a painting called The Great Wall, which is about the same size as the pink one. So another thing I think all the time, and it's this question, right? I don't know what a painting is. What is a painting? What has painting been? What could it be? And this was sort of a part of a thinking process of just discovering that it's a container. And that's really obvious to most people, but I was explaining to Ashley earlier. She was asking me, what are my obsessions? What are the things I come back to? And honestly, it's the most basic, what's a painting? And I get really kind of confused by that again and again. And then I sort of wake up to different ideas about what a painting is. So Heidegger's Dasein literally means being there. I don't really want to talk about Heidegger's Dasein. I want to sort of point to mood. Mood has everything to do with it. So, approaching something obliquely, falling into the world, throwing something and then following it, or getting stuck in something accidentally. But the thing I would point to, I guess, is just that I don't think there is any knowledge or understanding without mood. That moodedness, that mood is essential for being in the world. Otherwise, we're not actually in the world. And I would point that out because we live in an information society. We have information everywhere. But information without mood is meaningless. It can't be processed. And we try to think of ourselves as processors or as, like we are what we do, and we are computers now, but we're not very good at being computers because we need mood. Said that oddly, but okay. You guys feeling me, or am I just really off? Yeah? Okay. Thanks, I tittered, that's good. Maybe I'm really off, but that's fine. I can go on. Yeah, so this is the Buchloh, Farewell to an Identity. It came out in 2012. Benjamin Buchloh is one of those October people. I read theory, critical theory, and have been reading it obsessively since I was about 18 years old. Because back then I was just trying to smash capitalism in any way I possibly could. I just knew that this was the structure that was making all the things in my life bad. And so it was sort of, sort of single-minded, naming capitalism and trying to understand how we got to where we are. So all kinds of critical theory, from Frederick Jameson to the October people. And what's intense to me, and so that would go back to father figures too, right? These like sort of, these white male critics who are, doing their own critique. Adorno, I mean, there's this whole sort of history of this critique that I was trying to grasp and trying to get with. And I always felt very critiqued by it, obviously, because the process of reading that stuff is sort of supposed to be the process of undoing whatever these things have done to us, capitalism has done to us. Crazy thing, though, is that Buchloh and Hal Foster and even Rosalind Krauss are all weirdly having these sort of crises lately. They don't know how to think about anything any more than I do anymore. So these father figures, they're just like, they're throwing up their hands in different ways. You've noticed this. It's intense. It's intense to feel like I've been doing battle with something and trying to learn something from somebody who no longer knows what to do. Back to Rebel Without a Cause in the 1950s. I'm just like, somebody stand up and be dad, anybody. But then, that's a terrible idea, right? Because that's where fascism starts. So, right? I mean, it's so simple, but it's like, but I think all of us are, to a certain extent running around going, how come nobody's being Obama's not being a good enough dad? Or it's intense. I don't know. But, okay, and this is Ad Reinhardt being meditative in his studio. I love Ad Reinhardt. I have a fantasy about just being a black monochrome painter just like Ad Reinhardt. He supposedly said no to everything, but all those black paintings have their counterpart in all these cartoons and little diagrams and illustrations, and there's this sort of crazy manic activity going on next to, over there, in relation to the black monochromes, which I'm interested in. Where do you put that energy? And I agree with, this is a Reinhardt quote there. And the whole frame of this piece is this was the piece I made. We're going to get to better work soon, but this is what I made for post-bac year. I went to the Art Institute in 2004 to 2007, and my first year was post-bac because I came into art school so ignorant about painting. They took me because I was smart, but I didn't know what painting was. And so this is what I made at the end of my post-bac year. And it's basically, it's two Xeroxes of the cover of Daydream Nation, the Sonic Youth album, with the Gerhard Richter cover, which was the sort of my original experience of the Gerhard Richter candle paintings. And there's a string strung across and a book slung over it. So basically that string is not being burned by those candles because they're just images. It was basically like a very first step for me to say, like, images can't do anything and literature can't do anything. I was just sort of proclaiming failure or defeat, which was a good step for me to it was maybe the first time I went all the way down to giving up. And I do that a lot. And I think it's kind of useful. And Brooke was asking me earlier, like, why did you not center, if this image is all about symmetry, right? And then we'll have more formal symmetry later. Why did you not center Ad Reinhardt? But you have to see there's a little ball of string here that's right next to him. So, but this structure, Jan Vervoort used this image of Reinhardt too, and I saw it in somebody else's talk recently too. So I like that it's sort of like, this image is out there a lot. So this is an image from Lars von Trier's Melancholia, but I don't really want to talk about that movie. I don't know what I think about that movie. But but I had this image in the lecture, and I was sort of trying to get a handle on what I wanted to say about it. So finally, this is Buchloh. Finally, what is left available to us that we could call criteria of distinction and judgment that would not immediately appear as resignation, melancholia, or a restoration of some lost aesthetic, toppled authority, or relinquished cultural privilege of the bourgeoisie of the past. And I was explaining it to Brooke, and I was like, oh, that's, at the end she said, that's like I've never heard you say it that way, and I thought, you're right, this is what I mean. I think we tend to talk about hierarchies, we tend to talk about authority, criteria of distinction. We think of these things as being up here, above our heads, things we wear on our shoulders, things that come down from above. And I think, for me, they're way more about lead feet, way more about entanglement down here. There's something to weigh down, and it's very low. I don't take those burdens, those hierarchies don't feel like they weigh on my head. They feel like they give me something to resist physically. And that's what I love about this image. This is a drawing. It's just this, like a big studio drawing. It's about 8 feet, probably 8 feet long by 4 feet tall or something. And I put it with that kid. What's that kid's name from the Never Ending Story? Atreyu. And who's his horse? Artax. Yeah, thank you. So the drawing is called, did you all get it? The drawing is called Falco or the Luck Dragon, and I just posted it on Facebook last night just because I was like trying to get a boost. I was like, oh God, this is going to be so bad. And then somebody posted Atreyu and Artax, and I was like, oh, of course, the Swamps of Despair. Like, isn't that what they're called or something, right? Yeah. Sadness, Swamps of Sadness. All right. So this, on the left there, is an aftermath image of a performance that I did in, it was part of a design space, had a show. And so it was this huge warehouse where all these furniture makers and designers have their studios and their wood shops and things. And they invited a bunch of artists to do a show in their space. And so I took this junky, funky storage closet in the back, basically, and painted it this very terrible shade of blue, and staged something I called Disaster Kitchen, which was a performance. Dana DiGiulio, who I work with on a lot of different projects, wore her Chewbacca outfit with a bandit mask. And I played this character that I've played before, which is Marie Antoinette and Lucille Ball put together. And we just sort of hung out in the room and played with the paintings, and she took a 4-hour video of it. It's about a 6-hour performance. People came and went and joined us and made things and sat down. Kids came in. We would have sort of dance times when we would turn the lights out and just get kind of ridiculous. And I think it was just a sort of studio process for me, and I was invited to be a part of the show, and I did not want to contribute to a design aesthetic. I was really kind of, that wasn't interesting to me. So I tried to sort of be like a dirty secret in the back. Can't breathe. So the piece was called Disaster Kitchen also because it was just after Fukushima Daiichi, and I was thinking about, Exxon oil spills in Alaska and Fukushima Daiichi and just environmental disaster. I just was suddenly started thinking about basically how I feel like we are functioning like Lucille Ball with these environmental disasters. There's a kind of comedy of, it's a tragic comedy, but a comedy, especially after Fukushima. If you were watching the news, it's crazy. But the oil spills too, right? That's sort of like, who's in control here? And everybody, and then they were pouring. What was it in the Gulf, the Florida Gulf, when they started pouring other chemicals on top of the oil to try to, the solution to the problem just creates the next problem and the next problem, which is awesome in the studio for an artist, right? Like that is interesting and fun and exciting and a good exploration, but I don't know what makes these people think they have the right to do that on a global scale. So I don't know. I think artists are incredibly responsible and good. There's a virtue in sort of pointing out that this should not be enacted on other people, that this should happen in an enclosed space. So this is just an image of somebody's foot in that oil. So I was doing these performances a couple of years ago, just in front of my laptop. That's me in my kitchen. playing this sort of Lucille Ball, Marie Antoinette character. I got this wig, started playing that character. And this is a video still from a show I did in Oakland in Important Projects. So I just projected the video of myself. And I was singing along with the song China by Tori Amos. Haha. Yeah, maybe that's embarrassing. Maybe I'm still in the 90s. And then this is a painting with headphones embedded in it. And so I think a lot about headlessness. This condition, Georges Bataille called it acephale, A-C-E-P-H-A-L-E, acephale. Headlessness on different levels. And one of the ways, this talk is a lot about listening. And I've been thinking about looking at paintings in terms of listening to paintings, and what do we hear, and what is going on with our ears. So I'll say more about that in a minute, but walking around with headphones. I was talking about genitalia earlier, and so these are just these little doodles, but I've made a bunch of them from, I found these great magazines. Back in the day, everything has to be explained in terms of the technologies or how one comes across the information. And I hope that's not incredibly boring, but to me, it's sort of part of it. So this is from these are drawings from a magazine from a time before the internet, where gay men trying to find one another, you had to have like a publication, or you could go to the park, but I think this was the other way. So it was just these photos just of the crotch, so just the penis, like one after another, after another, after another, and that's how you were going to find somebody to fuck or get fucked by. And what I just started getting fascinated by was just this sort of like, because they were so organized, the information was so clear that then you could just say, you could basically just chart the movements of the penis. And I started thinking about how all the penises that I've known in my life all had a direction, and they always went that direction. That was just their direction. And I was just like, right? Maybe when they're hard, they're not going in that direction, but generally, that's their sort of place. And I was like, duh, men are born with a clock. They're born at 9 and they're always 9. Or if they're born at, 3, and we can talk. That's just their time. And it's such a different relationship to time than a woman's genitalia, which is, monthly, obviously, menses. And maybe there's other cycles too. There's also, I'm boring the shit out of them. Sorry. Anyway, yeah. So thinking about time and thinking about how time sort of is in our bodies. I mean, maybe when I'm making these comments about the clock, maybe some people in here are young enough to not even know what I mean. I'm talking about one of those clocks that are round. They're round. And they have hands. When I'm teaching painting classes, I always refer to the clock, because we do still have the old ones in the wall in the classrooms. And I always say, when the big hand is on the 8, come back from break. And they always think I'm really silly. So this is just this big wood panel, kind of a bulletin board of a painting. These are some images from a piece. Well, the top one is you've seen that on billboards everywhere, and maybe you have seen it in your own hand. That's an iPhone. That's for the adults in the room. Maybe you don't. Just kidding. Okay. Anyway, so I did this show, but last year, 2 years ago, called Scrying, and so I made about 65 or 70 of these lids. I took the lids off of jars and I made paintings in them. I mean, I sort of used them for mixing paint and then moved them into being paintings. Some of them I started to make decisions of taste or color or whatever on, and some of them I didn't, but just sort of collected them up. And then I put together 65 titles to go with them, but I did not tell you which one was which, and they were just displayed on low tables. And the titles were basically, starts with the solar anus. I'll read a couple. The solar anus, educated by dread, truculent temper of lions, chest bellowing, interacting motions of the two. The limbs are knitted together by atoms of body and mind, arranged alternately. Path of every creeping thing, normal neurosis, political winds, snatched the outsider mantle. Let no one touch me. Dragging and tugging us right to the eyeballs. A feeling of slavery in one's safety. destroy like gods. You know, I was really trying to sort of I found all this language from other places, but I was trying to just get a sense of sort of violence and speed and a kind of highly affective sort of hot space. Nerve centers are polarized, thousands killed or injured. So I was really just trying to get that sort of like that heightened like panic that the newspaper can make you feel, but in a kind of poetic space. And then I just wanted them to somehow have some kind of relationship. And the third part of this show was this series of photographs. So I was basically using that David Hockney thing where he walks around and takes a bunch of photos and then pieces them all back together. But I did it a lot. It was a lot more peripatetic. And I was just photographing my studio and kind of wandering around. And I tried to do three-dimensional objects like chairs and things, which was really didn't work at all. If you've ever tried that, it's you can't. I could not put it back together. And then I put the whole thing together in my studio. So it's just like thousands of photos. It was like about 1,000 photos. And then I sort of put them all back together. And, you know, total vertigo after a while because I was photographing. It's the space, and then I'm in the space. And so it was this sort of nice just experience of trying to understand what this space of the studio was. So the studio looks nothing like this anymore, but it's a snapshot of it. So, you know, if the studio is the sort of whole space or the total, you know, the comfort, the goldfish bowl for me or something, I was really trying to fragment it, break it up, fracture it, and then put it back together and then sort of counter it with these sort of tiny lids, which, as Brooke was pointing out, they're on the top of the jar, but I was making them on the bottom. So taking these things, toppling again. There's another one. And that's a painting on, you know. I'm making it hard to look at these things. One of my, Juliet, are you here? Did you make it? Juliet's one of my grad students from the Art Institute, and I sort of gave a preliminary version of this talk to my grad class a couple weeks ago, the one I teach with Dana DiGiulio. And she was like, you're not even letting them see the paintings. Like, why don't you just let them look at the paintings? This is awful. So if you're all feeling that way, I've already been told. I know that. I know. I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm sorry. There's the piece. That's the piece in the show. That's Brooke's photo of it, that red thing. I made it all red. Kind of liked it. Yeah. So, I don't know, maybe I'm just completely flopping this, right? The staticist. The octopus has a highly developed eye, but their hearing has been in question since the early 20th century. Recent research finds that the octopus hears with the staticist. So highly sensitive hairs in this structure allow the octopus to decipher sound. And again, as with mammals, this ear is also responsible for balance and spatial orientation. So noise-induced damage, which of course there's increasing amounts of noise damage going on in the seas, right? Noise-induced damage to this structure disorients the octopus, making it unable to decipher up from down to locate prey or even evade predators. And I think a lot about the octopus. Obviously, I'm mentioning it a number of times. This was a show that I had at Anacustera Space in New York. It was called Speak to My Ass, The Octopus is Sick. It came off of a quote from Guy Hockenheim, who wrote maybe the first text of queer theory back in the 60s. And Guy was a French intellectual and gay, and was disgruntled by his gay cohort, the other intellectuals in his community, not wanting to have sex with each other. They wanted to fuck different classes, right? Like working classes, usually. I mean, there was this real sort of, and that's common. That's a thing, you know, that people have difficulty fucking somebody they also talk to. So using this part of their bodies and this part of their bodies in the same relationship is often really, it's complicated. And I'm interested in that complication, both on a very deeply personal level and also on a political level in all kinds of ways. So this show was called Speak to My Ass, The Octopus is Sick, but Guy Hockenheim's quote, I think it was actually an old French country person quote or something, and it's Speak to My Ass, My Head is Sick. So I proposed it to this guy that I was flirting with on OkCupid, and he made it into that. That was nice. And then, so this is me wearing my Stevie Nicks outfit that I wore for that opening. And then this painting is called Stevie Nicks. And it's the first of these sort of weird flowy things, but each one of these, so it's a dyed scarf, or it's a dyed piece of fabric that I've sort of made into a scarf for the painting. But it's the first of these paintings that have this kind of drapery or flowing gesture. This is another one slightly later. I have a lot of paintings that are paintings connected to other paintings, and I just was speaking, I ran into Lisa Wainwright, who's the dean of the Art Institute, and she's going through her dean review at the Art Institute right now, and she came up to me at the SAIC alumni thing in New York the other day during CAA, and she said, I use one of your paintings for my dean's review, you know? And I was like, that's great, awesome. And she was like, yeah, I was illustrating a point about networks. What am I doing wrong? Like, how? But it's true, right? I mean, it's this like catch about critique or something that, you know, you're engaging with the thing, and so it looks like the thing, but it's a critique of the thing. But how do I have to, that's why I have to talk so much, if you're, you know, because I'm trying to figure that out. And if you have any idea, I'm working on it. I'm slow. Also, there was this cool moment where you could take images and you could feed them back into Google Image, and it would give you all of the sort of cognate images, like all the images that look like that image. It's not really doing that anymore. It's doing something else that's not as cool. But I thought that was kind of weird and awesome. I mean, mostly it was color, but it was also sort of spatial organization. This painting is called Monster Energy, and it's maybe like a funkier, smaller version. Each of those little paintings is 8 by 10 inches, and it hangs on the wall, as you can see. So it's a smaller version of what's in the space. I didn't say enough about the octopus, but I'll have to figure out how to say more. I mean, the octopus is a form, very simply, between the tree, which is a hierarchical structure, and the rhizome, which is entirely non-hierarchical and moves laterally. And Deleuze and Guattari have written a lot about the rhizome, and we talk about a lot of things in terms of this kind of lateral spread. And I'm using and thinking about and getting into, over the last 3 years or something, thinking about octopi, as a structure in between the two. And I have all these students who are always, you know, telling me they want a third way. They're always looking for a third way, because I'm always pushing dialectics on them. And they're like, no, can I have a third way? So I'm like, maybe it's the octopus? I don't know. But the octopus doesn't have a vertebra, which is problematic. Because that's how the nerves come together, and they go down the superhighway of the back of the spine, and then that's how you get the information about what you're. That's how you get pictures and synthesis of all the information that your body is taking in, is through the superhighway of the spine. So the octopus can wrap its entire body around something and has no idea what it's holding. I sawed this corner off, and then I stuck it back on. I just said this. Did I say this already? Melanie Klein drives to destroy and create. Did I say this earlier? I'm so tired of listening to myself, right? I'm saying the same thing again. But yes, Melanie Klein drives to destroy and create. That creation and destruction just goes back to infancy. This painting is called Puberty. One of the ways I think about these, and especially this one in the middle with the triangle, is I started thinking about them in terms of being batteries, thinking about paintings as what if a painting is a battery, like a charger or something? What kind of energy does it generate, or hold, or contain, or give back? Yeah, so this is we're iboting Buchloh yet again. However, another force becomes apparent in the desire for returns. Remember, the returns were like to returns to older forms of practice, like Ad Reinhardt or something. And it turns out to be the most important counter-discourse to collective spectacularization, to wit, the memnonic functions of culture, both individually and collectively practiced. Memnonics aim to translate information into a form that the human brain can retain better than its original form. Mnemonic devices help us remember things. Space is the best mnemonic device. If you've ever had a bad memory and done research on how to have a better memory. You put memories in places. So literally, if you walk through your house in your mind and you put all of the things you're trying to remember in a different spot in the house, then you can mentally walk back through the house and pick those memories back up. That's awesome when we used to live in space, but now that we live in the virtual world, where are we putting all of our memories? I just lose and forget so much, and I've never had a good memory, but it's getting worse. And that's a Corot painting. I love paintings of women reading books. I'm very interested in Michael Fried's history of, and my own sort of relationship to, paintings of people in absorptive tasks, the whole sort of history of painting as absorption. And I'm not going to talk about that today, but the black painting in the show is very much... They're early. What? Okay. Hello?
Hey!
Hi!
Hey, where are you? I can't tell you.
We're in the middle of the talk. I'm slow. Shit.
You guys have to come closer because I'm in the front. Are you giving your talk right now?
I am. Can we have both, or is that... That's Dana.
Are there a lot of people there?
Can you see us?
Nope.
Why not?
I see this weird Manet painting of a chick reading. All right, shirts off.
Shirts off. Oh my God. Hi, everybody. This is where I'm supposed to be right now. I'm teaching a grad seminar with Dana from 6 to 9 on Thursdays, and so there they are. That's my class. That's our class. Hi. Can you guys see us? Are you making fun? Wait. Do you see us? They were supposed to be able to see us.
I can't see you at all. I can only see this painting.
But you're looking at us as though you can.
That's because I'm looking into the camera. Are you guys looking into the camera? I think we should actually all start taking laps and just walk in front of the tree. I'm kind of serious. So should we ask you a question? What are they asking you?
They haven't asked me anything because I'm still babbling away, and I think they might be bored.
Oh, are they bored by this? Oh.
Maybe call again.
We're going to call you back, Dane.
Oh, for real? This is a radical gesture.
Yeah, now we're on the... See, there it is, the woman reading. That's the Manet painting she was talking about. Good timing, though.
Yeah, totally. Are you here?
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
So,
Dana, you have to do the same thing. You have to, like, select video. Ah! Yeah.
Oh, wait! Walk back in front of the camera. Look at all those... I almost said white people. So do they like it? Do they like it?
Hi. I wish you had a can.
Like it.
What? I can't hear you. I have a can on my ear. What? I hope they what?
I was asking the audience if they liked it.
Oh, jeez. What, like seeing you?
Good.
Good. I'm doing the best I can. Is it possible for you guys to be with us while I finish the talk, or is that's impossible, right? So we just have to say hi to you. Ask a question. Do something. Perform. Are you guys learning right now? Hi.
Yeah.
They're wasted. I'm wasted.
Is that Michaela?
Is that Michaela? Yes, she's over there.
Is she putting something? What are you putting on the board?
Should we ask you a question? Do you guys in Minneapolis think there's a difference between the confessional and the trial? And if there is, what is it?
That's a good one. We've been working on that one.
All right, well, you ask around and let me know. We're gonna go because this is weird.
It's like yeah, I know, it's awkward now. Now we're being awkward. All right. I know you are early, but I mean, I'll try to get you guys back. Give me 20 minutes. I'll try to get you back, or 15.
Yeah, I suppose you could keep calling. We have things to do here. Like, okay, all right, goodbye.
Okay. Back on track. Play. Slideshow. Done. Okay, moving right along. These are reenactments of Eve Babbitt's. You know this. You've all seen this famous image of Marcel Duchamp playing chess with a naked woman. And I can't even tell you how many years I looked at that image before I finally thought to myself, I wonder who that naked woman is. Did anybody like do that for years too without wondering who she was and then suddenly wonder? She was just a naked woman, right? She was just like, oh, she's a nude. She's a nude. Like, it's just fine. Like, Eve Babbitt's. This really kind of awesome, sort of weird, groupie writer, celebrity of Los Angeles. Major player in the LA art world and kind of just like bohemian community. Wrote a lot of books. I've been reading them. They're kind of trashy, but good. Nice. She's really into Los Angeles. Kind of a cool lady. Who knew? This is that thing I was talking about earlier, Asifal, Georges Bataille, and friends et al. The Surrealists made this magazine called Asifal, and this is an image of them, image that they used for the cover all the time. And yeah. This is a piece that you barely can see, but back there, it's an installation on my studio wall that I showed at Corbett versus Dempsey last year. It's called Anti-Expeditious, and I'm just crowding it up with a lot of conceptual art, Bernd and Hilla Betcher, and you know, the Google image search for invention of Google image, and other such things, so information. Expeditious means acting or done with speed and efficiency, so see synonyms at fast. That's the boat, the expeditious. Yeah, so the piece was called Anti-Expeditious because I was sort of trying to map out a kind of statement for how to do something in a kind of sloppy way. One of the things I always tell people when they come to my studio is it's messy on purpose. Mess slows me down. It's a productive mess because when I'm trying to find my scissors, if it takes me 45 minutes while I'm looking for my scissors, I'm wandering around and I'm noticing other things. So it actually involves this sort of, it reminds me to keep looking. It makes me see the space in different ways because I'm actually looking for something. It's a kind of moodedness of looking. I kind of brood because I sort of, you know, end up being like, why can't I ever find my scissors? I have like 10 pair, but I lose them all. I have all my dead grandmother's scissors. I collect scissors, but I still cannot find them ever. In my mind, the octopus is an ideal form. 8 legs and a head at the center, elegance and simplicity, but she is never photographed this way. She folds in on herself, her body tucked under rocks, squeezed through crevices, or in laboratories through tubes. I must imagine the clarity of her body. This is an image from a class I taught at Northwestern in fall of 2012. It's one of those really great panoramic photos. The class was called Reading Moby Dick as Artists, and at the end, so that's what we did. We just read Moby Dick for the whole quarter and talked about it, and we went on different journeys. Went on a sailing trip and made all these drawings. We would just like roll the paper out and then sit on the floor and draw every class, and then do other things along with it. We learned how to make rope. Yeah, so just different things happen. And this is Rilke. For the sake of a single poem, you must see many cities, many people and things. You must understand animals, must feel how birds fly, and know the gesture which small flowers make when they open in the morning. You must be able to think back to streets in unknown neighborhoods, to unexpected encounters, and to partings you had long since seen coming, to days of childhood whose mystery is still unexplained, to parents whom you had to hurt when they brought in a joy and you didn't pick it up. It was a joy meant for somebody else. To childhood illnesses that began so strangely with so many profound and difficult transformations, to days in quiet, restrained rooms, and to mornings by the sea, to the sea itself, to seas. But it is still not enough to be able to think of all that. You must have memories of many nights of love, each one different from all the others, memories of women screaming in labor, and of light, pale, sleeping girls who have just given birth and are closing again. But you must also have been beside the dying. You must have sat beside the dead in the room with the open windows and the scattered noises. And it is not yet enough to have memories. You must be able to forget them when they are many, and you must have the immense patience to wait until they return. For the memories themselves are not important. Only when they have changed into our very blood, into glance and gesture, and are nameless, no longer to be distinguished from ourselves, only then can it happen that in some very rare hour, the first word of a poem arises in their midst and goes forth from them. So that's kind of I'm working on the single poem. I'm just taken my time getting there. This is somebody reading Braille, and this is a tattoo that a neighbor of Michelle Grabner's got of Michelle Grabner's painting, which I thought was amazing. And when I first saw it, she used it as a show announcement, I thought it was Michelle Grabner. I thought it was hilarious and weird. And so that's one of Michelle's paintings. And then this is a close-up of Michelle's paintings. Michelle is one of my biggest mentors and guides, and I learn and have learned a ton from her over the last 8 years. You wouldn't know it from my work, but hey, that's what mentorship is for me. It's not about following. This is just kind of a, reference to my website. Janice, the head that looks in both directions. So if, these are the chairs. You've seen the piece in the gallery, just bookends. The push me, pull you. And there's Duchamp and Eve. Bookends. I'm thinking about bookends all the time. Frames, bookends, traps. This idea of contingency I'm going to talk about in 1 second. The idea of contingency plans. There's lecture balls in an earlier phase. It's a Degas and then Matisse with his lemons. And you can see the Matisse's lemons has a little bit of the world over there on the left, just a little bit of the world. And then Degas had all these drawings of prostitutes, and I just think it's fascinating. He put the world is the John coming in. You can see the John in the corner there. He's that little bit of black on the edge. These are some close-ups of my paintings in the studio. So space, I'm just interested in space. This is like the painting portion of this talk. Nests, tight spaces, small spaces. That's a list of Giambattista Vico from 1744, metaphors for the body. Couple of studio shots. The cut, the bleed, the bark, the tree, rough around the edges. I love you like China. So paranoid people, like con artists, spies, detectives, and paintings, prefer to place their backs against the wall in public places. One of the things I'm thinking about a lot, this is myself and my brother, little brother, and that's the 95 Theses that you have in your little, when you came in, they gave you that. So I had these put on the wall at the MCA for that show. It's this huge sort of mega statement coming off of Martin Luther's 95 Theses. But one of the things I'm thinking about a lot in this show is, what does it mean to make sculpture? What happens when something is in the round? What happens when it doesn't have its back against the wall? How do I feel about that? So this would be related to that. Sorry about the violent image. It's kind of, but I'm sorry. But so the upper image, just close your eyes. But up here is an image of somebody being surrounded by paparazzi. So you can't even see who's being, where is the spectacle? What are we supposed to be looking at? Completely surrounded and invisible, actually. The thing that's supposed to be seen is not there. And then, this image on the bottom on the left, that's from Aiken's Gross Clinic, but it's from Gape Porn. And I found this issue of Club International and didn't even know what this was, but I was thinking about porn. I've talked a little bit about porn, but I was realizing that I was going to move on so not make you look at it. I was realizing I was always thinking about porn in this really romantic sort of 70s porn, nice like hairy bodies and sweaty and nice lighting, and I was really into that kind of porn. But I was not, I'm not into the kind of robo-labia, like this sort of new porn. It's like waxed bodies, and they're not even bodies anymore, and I don't know I don't know. But I'm always trying to get myself to be in the world as it is and not sort of nostalgic about it. So I found this image of Gape Porn and just started thinking a lot about the body's like literal inside being exposed to the outside, the vulnerability, and the kind of terror of that vulnerability. And then this is another painting. These are what I call the belly paintings. I'll talk about those in a minute. And a Google image search on that. This is the flaying of Marsyas, and I will talk about that in a minute. I'm going so slowly, I'm sorry. I'm just going to whip. It's a Titian painting. This is Manet's balcony and Caillebott's balcony. Piero della Francesca and Guston, ears. All right, I'm going to read this text to you, and I hope it's not too long. So here we go. Can you handle it? Go fast? Yes? Okay. So this lecture is for Keon Maymand, who died on February 8th, and for my friend Doug's partner Tom, who died on Tuesday, and also for 3 dear friends who are not present, to whom I am always listening, and from whom I am always hoping to be heard. It's called Not Late But Early. It's about the failure of contingency, the necessary blushing for now, and the impossible. The 3 pieces upstairs. So the duty of rhetoric is to deal with such matters as we deliberate upon without arts or systems to guide us. Aristotle stresses the contingent because no one deliberates on the necessary or impossible. He believed that the unavoidable and potentially unmanageable presence of multiple possibilities creates and invites rhetoric. That would be what I've been doing so far, is this rhetoric. So this is from Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra. And when I came out of my solitude and crossed over this bridge for the first time, I did not trust my eyes, and looked again, and said at last, an ear as big as a man. I looked still more closely, and indeed, underneath the ear something was moving, something pitifully small and wretched and slender. And no doubt of it, the tremendous ear was attached to a small, thin stalk. But this stalk was a human being. If one used a magnifying glass, one could even recognize a tiny, envious face. Also, that a bloated little soul was dangling from the stalk. The people, however, told me that this great ear was not only a human being, but a great one, a genius. But I never believed the people when they spoke of great men, and I maintained my belief that it was an inverse cripple who had too little of everything and too much of one thing. I wanted to paint the globe black as a symbolic act, like the Rolling Stones or Ad Reinhardt, an obliteration, a negation, a final act, an end. My action collapses. The globe resembles a cheap portable liquor cabinet, a gag gift. I want you to see the drips with your fingers, measure the size of the drips relative to the topography of the Rocky Mountains, and catch your breath at the vertigo of comparative scale shifts. Globalization is the conjoined ascendancy of real-time, immediacy, instantaneity, and ubiquity on real space. I want the handcuffs to perform a formal connective operation, to be abstract and highly politicized at the same time. I want you to walk around the sculpture and feel hemmed in by its tangle. I want to live in a world where capitalism has an opposition and can be bracketed and compared to something else. Instead, I live in this world, and I've been told the only critique is negative. Flesh, touching and touch to the heart, gives ear and listens. It is a haptology of the heart, of an open-handed heart, open-hearted hand, the touch of divine, heartfelt mercy. The eye listens, the ear listens, flesh listens, and burns up, all but dying to listen, docilely. Jean-Luc Nancy writes of sound being transmitted to the ear and activating the vocal organs, so the passivity of listening becomes active through echoing. Bats use echolocation to gauge distance, winging through black skies. Lane lives alone with 3 cats, and when we talked on the phone, I could hear the clanging of the cat food can, the yowling he referred to as vocalizing. We are accustomed to talk about opticality when speaking or writing of paintings. Visual art is, sensibly, about what can be seen with the eyes. We are also engaged in an ongoing discourse about the haptic, which sometimes engages questions of the handmade, craft, or technology, and other times indicates questions of and around material, touch, pressure, texture. I would like to talk to you about my paintings, and paintings in general, in terms of the oral. Not the oral as in spoken, although of course that is indicated by my use of voice and words issuing from my mouth. The oral, with an AU at the outset, is invoked in discourse about the différence between speech and writing. These are written texts, but I like to bring them up in conversation. Bringing something up allows it to be a little higher. Sound idea, you murmur with an uplifted tone to your neighbor, or perhaps you whisper, sneeze, bullshit, and shoot out of your seat with a displeased bang. But either way, you have risen. Defied gravity, or realistically, deferred it for a little. Gravity is not furry, but of course it is. It's a fact, a comfort, a relief. A relief is also a visual object that sits on a wall but extends into the viewer's space. But here it is, this innocuous word, viewer, which assumes so much and seems to me recently overdetermined. I suggest tonight the substitute listener. Here is why. Hearing is caused by the vibration in a surrounding medium to resonate some part of an animal's body. Sound travels through water, earth, and air, and water is a stronger conductor of sound than air. Before the evolution of the ear, early creatures, reptiles and amphibians, experienced sound in their whole bodies. The ears make the head a parenthetical remark. To remark is to mark again. 1. Hamlet's father is poisoned in the garden. He lies sleeping, and the poison is poured into the porches of his ears. The porch of the ear is a balcony, like that one in a Manet painting or that other one in a Caillebotte. An interstitial space between the home, the head, and the world, in this case the orchard of the Scottish castle. 2. The ears can't be closed, as can the mouth and the eyes. This problem is solved by Homer when he has Odysseus plug his men's ears with wax in order to block them from hearing the siren's seductive cries. 3. Georges Bataille was obsessed with the condition of headlessness, which eradicates mouth, eyes, ears, and retains only touch, but renders touch irrelevant without a nervous system. The nervous system existed while creatures were still in the sea and had no vertebra, but with the movement to land and the chewing of tough meat and plants, the hinged jaw began to develop, and simultaneously the vertebra, which became a superhighway for the nerves, allowing extremely fast information transfer from the nether regions to the brain. Making sounds during orgasm, listening to the breathing of a partner, moving my jaw to unplug my ears on commuter flights, my body folded into a narrow seat under a plastic tray. 4. Sit on the edge of your seat, lean forward, and listen for the quietest sound in the room. Please do it with me now. This is the posture and the affect of fear. You are listening, but your body is poised in anticipation. 5. Writers are often angry about encroachments of sound or the negative cousin of sound, noise. Not being able to think is the first complaint when the music is too loud, the construction too incessant. I lived above an empty storefront for my first year out of grad school, a purple-painted Curves, the women's athletic club. The building was purchased and the new owners began building a restaurant bar below my apartment. The construction took 1 year, and afterward, the bar opened and the DJs would play until 4 a.m. 3 or 4 nights a week. 6. I made paintings in my small apartment during that year. I attempted to think and see and hear my paintings, despite the jackknife, sawing, grinding, drilling, which felt like it was inside my head. I would run downstairs at 2 a.m. in a panicked rage and beg them to turn it down. As my plates shook on their shelves, my plaints fell on deaf ears. 7. I made about 65 lid paintings a couple of years ago, mixing paint in lids for other paintings. I began to save the lids and consider them as small, round, colorful, gestural paintings. Accompanying the lids was a list of titles, which circled around feelings and experiences of speed, violence, and value. The show was called Scrying, which refers to practices of divination, such as palmistry, tea leaves, crystal ball gazing. The word scrying is a portmanteau, composed of seeing and crying. 8. I have a drawing from ancient Greece of women gesturing skyward in different postures, from contrition to grief to supplication. I imagine I can hear them keening, wailing, loudly mourning. 9. What will you hear if you listen to a painting? What do your ears do when you are looking? As with John Cage's 4 minutes 33 seconds, you might hear everything you had not heard before. The room, the space, the tone will be made into the figure, and the painting will become ground. Now tune the sound out and tune into the painting again. This is a radio metaphor. 10. The ears are bookends to the brain. 11 is a series of, I think they're those things, but just the one, not the two. Not quotation marks, but that one thing, right? And then it goes all the way along the line, and then there's a 1 at the end. 12, I felt for many years that I was painting blind. I just could not see what I was doing on the surface of the canvas. I could look at the painting, but I couldn't see it. At the same time, I was not listening to music in the studio. I could not. I worked in silence. I think I had a need to purge something and to listen very carefully to what was coming up. 13, Titian's Flaying of Marsyas is a haunted painting in which Apollo, having triumphed over the satyr Marsyas in a musical contest, gets to slice off the loser's skin. Marsyas, hung upside down from a tree, stares expressionless, blood pooling below him, where a tiny dog laps up the droplets. King Midas, a Titian self-portrait, chin in hand and meditative, gazes on helpless. A crush of figures crowd the foreground, orchestrating complex arrangements of limbs, roughly defined in pigment, from which emerges a single tiny white dot that is the light in Marsyas's eye. Staring blankly back at us. "Help," Marsyas clamored. "Why are you stripping me from myself?" "Never again, I promise. Playing a pipe is not worth this." But in spite of his cries, the skin was torn off the whole surface of his body. It was one raw wound. Blood flowed everywhere. His nerves were exposed, unprotected. His veins pulsed with no skin to cover them. It was possible to count his throbbing organs, and the chambers of the lungs clearly visible within the breast. I'm skipping 14. 15. Trepanning the globe, drilling a burr hole in the skull to relieve pressure, remove the stone, let the world enter more directly, bypassing the senses. 16. What good is knowledge if it just floats in the air? It goes from computer to computer. It changes and grows every second of every day, but nobody actually knows anything. That's from Don DeLillo's White Noise. 17. Scalping the globe. The scalp is portable proof of prowess, worn on the belt at the waist, swinging wildly. 18. Acoustic neuroma is a non-cancerous growth in the brain that causes tinnitus, ears ringing, buzzing, dizziness. 19. I began speaking when I was 2 years old and arguing soon after. I read constantly as a child, and writing seemed like an obvious progression in my teens and 20s. Sitting with a book or pen or typewriter stills the body, and in my chair, at my desk, on the couch, my nose in a book, I would pick at a pimple, chew on the inside of my mouth, my body present, pressing against, resenting the stillness, small rebellions, picking, scratching, fingernail insurrections, defying the tyranny of my head. 20. Last year I wrote the 95 Theses on painting to begin delineating it's almost done, to begin delineating a territory in which I could work. Against pluralist relativistic practices, global biennial practices, hyphenated careers, artist, curator, critic, teacher paradigms. The text is flawed, defeats itself, changes position, and argues against itself. And the other day in Chelsea, I saw the Basquiat show at Gagosian and walked away rewriting the 95 Theses in my head, beginning with number 1, I lied. Painting is neither radical nor avant-garde. It is a bloated vehicle for monetized transactional and exploitative relations. Talking with a friend on the phone that evening, she asked me why I hated the Basquiat show so much, and as I began to try to explain, I found myself remembering the portraits, the address, so consistently frontal, one or both hands raised, mouth often open. The pathos of the silence of those paintings, in contrast with the use of found wood, palettes, rough structures, drop cloths, sheets. I realized I was moved and deeply saddened by the constraints, the rigor in his consistency. Too little to see and too much. I want to rescue him from the canvases, and yet he seems defiant in there, again and again and again, painting his stick figure autobiography. 21. The inner ear has 2 functions. The first is hearing, and the second is balance. It is a warren of tubes filled with fluid encased within the temporal bone of the skull. A warren is a place where rabbits breed and live, a network of underground interconnecting rabbit burrows, and by analogy, an overcrowded place or building. 22. Balance is a choreographed arrangement that takes sensory information from a variety of organs and integrates it to tell the body where it is in relation to gravity and the earth. There are 3 semicircular canals in the inner ear positioned at right angles to each other like a gyroscope. They are able to sense changes in movement of the body. With such changes, endo-lymph waves within the canals, let's see if I can do it, let's see if I can do this, I'm going to get this, cause hair cells located within their bases to move. Position of the head is sensed by, this is one of the things we do in art class, we teach people how to fall. Position of the head is sensed by hair cells, which are stimulated when the head moves and the relationship to gravity changes. 23, listening to my mother as she describes looking at the paintings where the mouth is open, trying to imagine what is coming out of it. 24, able was I ere I saw Elba is a palindrome attributed to Napoleon after he was exiled to the island of Elba. 25, on the phone with my mother Sunday afternoon, she described the process of sight as a juggernaut, as light rays travel through the eye, undergoing reversals, ping-ponging across chambers. A juggernaut, an overwhelming advancing force that crushes or seems to crush everything in its path. Okay, we're going to fly. This is the spine of the talk. So we're moving on our way out. Everything backwards, more or less. And I would like to just kind of go through, and if you have anything to say, I think I would like to start questions now as we're on the decline. And I do hope that that wasn't too long. I do panic that I'm making people sit. So yes, please, by all means, talk back or walk out. And thank you.
Hey, my name is Kirsten.
Hi, Kirsten.
And I just feel like I've been having sex with your mind for the past hour.
Awesome!
I'm just like, seriously, like my heart's
Welcome.
pounding. I'm like shaking. I'm like, I have to move to Chicago. I have to talk to these people. But I painted a piece a couple years ago, a night after I had slept with somebody, and I sent a picture of this painting to my friend, not telling her I had slept with him. And she saw it in the painting, even though it was an abstract painting. She saw a woman's legs spread, and now I've 4 years later, actually, I've decided to do it. This piece calls for a dance to fully bring forth what it means, and I'm not a dancer, and I just wondered. I don't know. I just want if you've ever ventured into an art form that's not your own, where you have a strong voice, but you need to venture there, and then about that.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you. Beautifully spoken. You have to make that dance, absolutely. And then you have to figure out, you have to figure out why you did it, and you have to then take the next step. I don't know. I think this is my way of being in the world is to always follow pleasure, to always follow what I want, and to be incredibly self-critical about everything that I do, but to always try to get exactly what I want. And I get so little that I really want, but I go for it. Can't say I didn't try, but I think even sculpture, like even this object, and I don't want to be a sculptor. Sculpture is now a relational aesthetics practice. It's a social practice. All sculptural activities are sort of about the social, and I'm very committed to the privacy of my studio, and but you have to do what you have to do. Thanks. Eric?
I have a question, but can I come up here?
Please. Oh, gosh, yes. Look, you have to use that. Are you going to sit with me?
Yeah. But I need my notebook to ask it. So I want to go back to the idea that you began with of headlessness.
Mm-hmm.
And Courbet's Origin of the World.
Mm-hmm.
And the ubiquitous technology of the New York Times that informed me that somebody had recently discovered a painting that was thought to be the head of the headless woman.
No way.
And I was interested in this idea of the possibility that this painting could once again have its sort of senses back, that it could be a painting that could listen or have balance again.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a problematic condition, thinking about these two paintings finding each other, because it's certainly not an aesthetic problem, but one rooted in capital. A painting that obviously circulates with value in the world. And here's another one. Here's a new one. But I'm curious about this notion of connecting one painting to another in the studio, and wondering what's the use of connecting one painting to another, or another one. Capital already performs this function.
Eric, that's a fantastic question. Maybe that's exactly what will release me from this really stupid activity of connecting paintings to one another. Capital does perform this function. Thanks for saying that. I don't know. I talk about things like the cell phone doesn't have a cord on it anymore, and I have generational anxiety, I think. I'll just say I have generational anxiety on I don't know what other people know, and I don't know how they know it, and it causes constant panic, and especially generationally. I don't understand what the 20-year-olds know and what the 50 and 60-year-olds know, and how. And I wish that I don't know. yeah, capital performs that function, but then what is, I guess I want to make connections that I think are meaningful and not capital's connections. And those connections, right? I mean, that's obviously the answer, but it's like,
Well, other things perform that function too. I mean, for instance, I'm sitting here watching, your lecture, and I see an image of myself wearing the same like crummy like sweater that I bought at H&M 3 years ago, like projected onto the screen, thinking like this other image of myself has found me again. It's traveled the circumference that we've talked about. The latitude that we've talked about, from Moby Dick, and thinking about
totally.
how pictures always find their mirror.
Hito Steyerl talks about that, the circulation of images in all these different really great ways, right? Will this work? No. Huh? Oh, well. Right?
I suppose so. I think that I think the network is less complicated than the mirror in a way.
Go on. You're saying really, these are really great
I
things.
think that's maybe someone else should talk.
Well, say more about why the network is more, what? Say that again? The network is more complicated than the mirror?
Well, I just like those moments when the picture finds itself again, or you travel around the circumference of so many images, and then it returns itself back to you in the form of PowerPoint, and that's sort of more interesting than like accepting a friend request.
Mm-hmm. Is that the same? Nicely done, Eric. Is that the same as the reflexive bird song of the feedback loop that Jan Vervoort was talking about? It is like the Rilke poem. No, yeah, hey, no? Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll get up there too. But can you talk about? It's
like reverse therapy.
So
it's
I
really
want to know.
traumatizing, isn't it? Yeah.
Are you? I'm just sort of thinking crap walk or crab walk. And for those of you some of you may have been at the opening day talk. There was a lot of very interesting conversations, and there was a really great speaker here who used the idea of a crab walk as a kind of a way to get into how painters today, or painters historically as well, have like a certain canon of painting that he was tracing or resurfacing. This idea of moving sort of sideways, sort of sidestepping certain entrenched ideas and other things. And I thought it was a beautiful talk, but there was this kind of interesting aspect of it, which was he was talking about the crab walk, but because of his accent, I think many people in the audience thought he was talking about the crap walk. And I kind of like the idea of a crap walk too in relationship to painting, and I'm wondering if you agree or disagree.
I wholeheartly agree, and I just want to thank you for that idea.
But anyway, I know this has been quite a long and lovely, from my perspective, I've enjoyed it a lot, but are there any more questions while we're here? Yes?
You talked about your interest in like anti-capitalist politics and such, and your transition into art or painting as sort of like a late after the fact. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that transformation in your life, and whether you felt like did your political friends feel betrayed, or how did you make that transition, and how did you feel about it?
Yeah, there's a lot of, mostly what I do with my time is teach. I spend most of my time just being a pedagogue, and for better or worse, right? So I still feel that I'm doing what I consider to be the best I can do, to take all of my time to try to radicalize and sort of reactivate bodies in space and time, or I don't know, whatever that is. I can only do what I can do, and so I don't feel at all that I've sort of betrayed an earlier political approach or place. If I begin to feel that way, I will be making other changes in my life. But you know, I mean, my activist friends are doing all kinds of different things, and I'm 38, and most of my friends are older now too, and people do things like have babies, and you know, and everybody sort of does different things with their lives than they did when they were just going to protests and getting put in jail, or you know, organizing sex workers' road shows and things. I mean, there were all kinds of, you know, things that we were doing. But I also, I mean, I just think that making things, it's taken me a long time, but I think that making things is a radical activity. Making useless things, wasting time, experiencing pleasure are radical.
Well, that seems like a good note on which to leave it. Thank you very much, Molly.